Welcome, everyone, to this month's Digital Cafe. I'm Christina Carell from MSU Extension, along with Ann Nardi and Bailey Tangen. We welcome you today. Soil Health Nexus is a group of university-led researchers and extension professionals interested in soil health. This team that we're on includes everyone from the 12 North Central region states. Not only is there university staff, but we have some farmers, there's some federal and state employees who join us, and we talk about soil health. So this week's soil health format will be presentations. I apologize. Bailey Tangen will be giving our presentations today, and then we will break up into breakout rooms. We will have a researchers, educators, agency, farmers, and students rooms, and you will put yourself into your own breakout rooms when that time comes. Like I said, today Bailey's going to talk to us about some of her research that she's done on ag ecosystems and environment. So with that, Bailey, I'm going to stop my share and you can take over.
All right, does the screen look normal and what you guys are looking for? I like these controls. Did my audio get better?
It's a little bit fuzzy, but it's better.
Okay. Feel free to stop me at any point if it gets unbearable. But otherwise I will get started here. So hello everyone, I'm Bailey Tangen. I work at the University of Minnesota Extension as an educator focused on soil health and water resources. I'm super excited and super grateful for the opportunity to present today. So thanks for joining. And I also want to acknowledge all these great collaborators who are listed on the bottom of the screen. Jeff Vetch, Greg Johnson, Jeff Strock, Aaron Day, Claire Phillips, and my advisor at the time when I did this research during the master's, Annie. So very grateful for their help in initiating this project and also helping me with this. So I work at the University of Minnesota as an extension educator, but we wear many hats. And one of the hats we wear is the Minnesota Office for Soil Health and also working with the Water Resources Center. So I work with a team of folks here and we're based in different parts of the state. We work on soil health and cover different topics, but we all work statewide. So I wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot of great collaborators that I get to work with every day. And I figured, well, I'm going to talk about the research, and while I have the floor, I'd love to introduce myself a little more, especially because I'm newer to my role and got started about 2 years ago. So who I am is someone who is an educator, but more than that, I am just someone who absolutely loves soil and soil pores. Really, my whole goal is to get people excited about the world beneath their feet and curious about soil below. I love soil pits, so I include a lot of soil pit photos because soils hold the history of the earth, how they formed. They tell us awesome stories about the humans that manage them and the ecosystem within. And I engage folks on soil health in a variety of different ways, whether that's through field days, through videos, doing art installation, infiltration fieldwork, and as an assistant coach of soil judging for the University of Minnesota soil judging team. But let's get to the research, the reason why everyone is coming to this call. Farmers are seeing climate change impacts and risks firsthand. Talking with farmers, they're seeing that they're getting too much water and not enough water within the same growing season. And this can cause a lot of problems for their crops, for stress on the farmers, and for soil and water outcomes like erosion and runoff. There are a variety of risks that are facing farmers, and weather risks are becoming much more severe. And we are seeing that over the different weeks where they're reporting field working days, which is an important metric reported by the USDA Agricultural or National Agricultural Statistical Service, where they're reporting how many days in a week can farmers actually get into the field and get the field work done. They talk with extension personnel, with farm service agency folks, and farmers themselves to report these days. And we're seeing that there are fewer working days at critical field work times. In this study in 2017 by Tomsek et al., they found that modeling the Illinois climate projections, that they were getting a decline in the overall April through May workability days. And while this study was in Illinois, we see that this is actually happening in Minnesota as well. When we look at 133 years of weather and climate data, we're seeing that there's predicted increases in rainfall in the planting season and in the harvest season. So planting in Minnesota, which we grow a lot of corn and soybeans, is going to be happening in April and May. And having much more water there can be a huge problem for actually getting into the field. And not only are we seeing an excessive amount of water, we're seeing that there's this decrease in water at that peak crop water need time in that heart of the growing season where the crop really needs to have that water or is going to have a lot of crop stress. So rainfall patterns are changing, not only in terms of the timing of the rainfall, but also the intensity of rainfall, frequency, and variability of rainfall. So this on top of the other risks facing farmers are really compounding stress. And one thing to point out though is rain isn't the risk. It's really the soil response to rain that's the risk. If you have good soil structure, good soil pore connectivity, you can actually infiltrate that water, helping absorb and move it into that crop rooting zone, lessening your risk. So capturing that water and moving that rain to the right place and having the right amount of water at the right time is really the key to reducing risk. But risk is based on a variety of factors, and weather is one of the variables of that. And it's that soil condition which we have control over rather than the weather. So what can you do to try to reduce that risk, especially with the soil condition? Healthy soil really is armor and infrastructure against destructive rain. And rain really can be destructive. So I've highlighted here this photo of a raindrop hitting the soil surface. Raindrops can hit the soil at 20 miles per hour, which can be incredibly destructive. If you've got stable aggregates, you get good infiltration, you get water moving into that crop rooting zone, but it's the soils where we don't have a lot of that organic matter binding agents, we have weaker aggregates. We don't have residue cover. Those are the soils that are much more vulnerable to rain/erosion. And we see that when you have the structure of the soil breaking down, you can get loose particles. Those loose particles contain organic matter, nutrients. These are critical for crops, for your operation, and these particles can fill in the pores in the surface soil. So you get this sealing or crusting that occurs. This can increase runoff, and ultimately you can lose the organic matter and nutrients that you need, which will be lost through erosion. So a lot of negative outcomes when rain hits the soil and soil isn't protected. And pores are critical for moving the water, but it's also how they are arranged. And not only is rain destructive to soil, it can break soil down, but if we've got really wet soils, especially around important field working times, this can cause farmers to unfortunately compact soil, not by choice, but it's just not able to hold up the strength of this equipment. It's very heavy, the equipment is getting heavier, and so ultimately we're seeing a compaction and decrease in pore space and less well-connected pores. And the pores are the channels in the soil that are absolutely vital to how water, nutrients, and air move, as well as how roots are growing through the soil. So in a healthy soil, on average, while there are many caveats, soil should be about 50% pore space by volume. So that's a lot of the soil, right? Well, unfortunately, with compaction, we're reducing that pore space, and this is increasing waterlogging, crop stress, and a variety of other issues for farmers and for crops. This is a group of folks who have an interest in soil health, so I'm not going to go too deep with this definition, but there are two parts that I really like to point out when I'm talking to folks, which is that soils are a vital living ecosystem, very diverse, and it contains many numerous organisms that are vital to how a soil functions and behaves. And those two things are critical in order for us to have healthy, productive growing systems and keep our operations profitable and productive in the long run. In this study, we look at different soil functions, but the two that are really relevant for farmers that we really looked at was regulating water and supporting traffic. In this meta-analysis that they did, Beige and DeLong did back in 2017, they compared different soil hydrology systems. So they were looking at these perennial and annual based crop systems. So across a gradient of continuous living cover. And they found that in the systems that had the greatest amount of roots and plants growing in those systems, so the greatest amount of time of that continuous living cover, that those systems were able to have the best hydrologic capacity and actually get more pore space and field capacity increases. They also found that when these systems were in place a long time, for like 10 plus years, you really began to see the benefits of this. So keep this in mind as we're talking about some of the data that I'm going to present. So healthy soils could lead to better water outcomes, as I just showed you with some of this previous work, that soil health is often linked to improved water function, but soil structure is dynamic, and this can be changed and altered not only by rainfall, but how we're managing the soils. And also important is that farmers aren't just dealing with an average amount of rain or average conditions. In Minnesota, we have yet to have just a normal, regular year, at least in my time being here in the last 7+ years. Farmers are often seeing a 2-inch rain in an hour and really trying to reduce the risk so that's not a problem for them to get into their field and to grow healthy crops. So this project that I'll talk about today really emerged from conversations with farmers. Farmers who are using different soil health management practices like keeping the ground covered, using cover crops, keeping roots in the ground, reducing disturbance. Those farmers were saying that they could get to their fields more quickly after a rainfall than many of their neighbors who were pretty much just tilling their soils many times. They weren't keeping the soil covered. And so because of this, the farmers using soil health management practices had better soil strength, or they had residue cover that would allow for tractability or better pore connectivity. And we wanted to test that claim because we felt that was a very interesting anecdote. And if true, it could be a pretty convincing way to talk to farmers about soil health and the value of practices and mindset for management. These are 2 videos that we had worked on previously at a field school for ag professionals at the University of Minnesota. We ran infiltration tests, and after the test, we took these roots out of the soil and we applied the same amount of water to both of these soils. These are mapped as the same soil type, so they should have the same composition, but as you can see from these animations, they are quite different. The soil in the middle or left side animation is just like Jello. It wouldn't really hold up much, and it's not going to retain that structural stability or strength. So that field, you can see there's not much structure at all. It was our heavily tilled field. Whereas the field on the right had this nice structure that even though it was saturated with water, we actually could see the structure holding together, and we didn't see that same jello-like effect. So this was another inspiration for us to take a deeper look at these different types of management practices and their impacts on dynamic soil properties. We did this study in southern Minnesota, which often has these heavily poorly drained glacial till soils. And we wanted to compare different management systems because often the farmers are very limited in getting their field work done in time because of the soil types there. I want to show you guys these 2 photos as kind of a way to preface the results that I'm going to show. This was at a site that we had set up between these 2 on-farm systems. One was more conventional, and I'm going to say the word conventional in parentheses, or I should say, just trying to advocate that it's not just conventional. We have different nuances, and it's the same with soil health. But we'll get more into the actual details of the management systems in a few slides here. The point being that there was a lot of tillage and not a lot in this field on the left. You can see that there was not much structural integrity whatsoever. Quite a bit of crusting on the soil. And I took this photo in May of 2022, so the crop was just beginning to come up. And you can see here that it couldn't even hold up footprints. let alone probably in traffic implement. If you compare to the soil on the right, that field was using no-till, covered crops, having diverse crop rotations for 30 plus years. You can see that if these fields were to receive 3 inches of rain, they might behave very differently. And I know how they behave, but I'm just trying to give a little teaser for what I'm going to show you guys next. So thinking back again to that, what's going to happen to the water when it falls onto the surface? Is it going to infiltrate into that crop rooting zone, or is it going to run off? So talking with farmers, doing a little literature review, we asked the question, how does management affect soil response to rain? We were especially interested in those dynamic soil properties and dynamic hydrological function. Based off of all these anecdotes and literature reviews, we thought that these soil health management systems were likely to capture more rainwater, probably due to a better pore connectivity and greater amount of pores in the soil. And we thought these systems were more likely to retain stable structure after rainfall. So we had sites set up on farm across southern Minnesota. We also had some sites at these plot trials. And for time today, I'm not going to get too deep into the plot trials. I'll show you more about that at the end. But first here, looking at the Dundas, Cannon City, and Blooming Prairie sites. So I'm going to refer to these as acronyms. So if I say D for Dundas, Cannon City would be CC, and BP for Blooming. These soils range from clay loam, silt loam to loam. And we were probably about an hour apart at the most between these different sites. But as I've mentioned, it's not just conventional or soil health. It's definitely more nuanced than that. And oftentimes with soil health, we see there's a gradient in terms of the number of different principles that are being applied and also the length of time that they're applying them. So I'm going to go through site by site and talk to you about the soil health sites, because the conventional sites often use very similar practices, chisel plowing, sometimes moldboard plowing, using corn and soybean rotations, and not using cover crops. In terms of this gradient, moving from a little less soil health management to the most amount of soil health management in stacking these practices, we'll start with the Dundas site. So this farmer was using vertical till, no-till frequently, but not as much as the vertical till. And he also had been using cover crops in his corn and soybean rotation. He was doing this for the least amount of time, which was about 7 years. The next site was Cannon City. This farmer was doing a little less disturbance with his strip till machine and had corn and soy rotation, doing strip till for about 30 years, and had begun implementing rye cover crops for about 8 years. And the site where they were really stacking many of these practices and had been doing this for the greatest length of time was this Blooming Prairie site. They were doing no-till corn and soybeans and wheat. So they were adding that extra crop in crop diversification into the rotation, and also had been using rye covers. They've been doing that for about 30 years. So just to show you that soil health isn't a one size fits all, and it does differ along those gradients. We collected a lot of data, and I will admit that some of that data is not actually shown in this presentation, but at the end, I'll have a QR code to the paper so you can do a deeper dive. But some of the data I want to highlight was this response to rain data. So I would go out before a rain, hopefully about an inch or larger. In 24 hours before the rain, I'd get soil samples so we could collect that from the surface 0 to 15 centimeters and run aggregate stability tests in the lab. And we were also measuring soil water content. So 6 different depths from 0 to 100 centimeters. We were doing this at 24 hours after rain and then 3 to 4 days after, because we were really interested not only in the overall property that these soils have, but in the change in properties around them. And we also wanted to look at soil health metrics. So the ones that I'm excited to talk about today are pore size distribution and soil carbon pools. So we also want to note that this data came from a really, really wet fall. Fall of 2019 in Minnesota was very difficult for farmers. very difficult to even try to get harvested. So we did that, wrote up the grant, it was great. But of course, it doesn't always pencil out like you like it to. So we collected this data in 2021 and in 2022. And in Minnesota and many other places, we had some of the most extreme droughts we'd had in years. It was incredibly dry. So for someone who was trying to get a master's and get 2 years of work done, found it a little difficult to try to find those 1 inch rains. But we were able to make some of that happen. And I'm going to start off by showing you this mean volumetric water content as a percent at the 10 centimeters, so like right around the surface level, and show you what we found here. Just because we're going to see a couple of plots that look like this, I want to try to set it up. So here on this x-axis, we are looking at over the growing season by month, and we separated this into 2 years, 2021 and 2022. We also split these by the different sites because the soil types differed and the management systems differed. So Blooming Prairie, Kansas City, and Dundas. And then over here is going to be the metric of interest. So for this plot, we're looking at the mean volumetric water content. And the green line is soil health, and the orange line is the conventional site. So paired setup, and what we found was that there were few significant differences in mixture, especially in these really dry years. We did see a significant difference at 20 centimeters, so a few inches lower in depth, but realistically, we didn't see these great differences that we thought we would see, which was very interesting to us, but could have a positive, especially with different cover crops. Sometimes folks say that they're going to use up all the moisture, but here we didn't necessarily see that to be true. And the structure data was a little more interesting. But to step back and try to put this into context, these systems differed not only in the practices they were using, but the organic inputs that are being added to the systems and how they were being managed in terms of disturbance. Roots in soil organisms are going to play a major role in creating structure and pores, but also in maintaining these structures and pores in terms of recovery and resilience to rainfall. And I show here a few different cool little soil features. And what we were interested in more than just generic soil structure was the macro aggregates. So the larger aggregates where those are held together by these organic binding agents rather than the micro aggregates. So keep that in mind when I present the structure data that we mainly try to look at the larger aggregates. So similar plot setup, but now we are looking at the percentage of soil sample by mass for the macro aggregates, for the large aggregates. We saw that overall, the healthy soils generally had better structure. And this was across the board for both years. And while we weren't as interested in the overall structure, we were more interested in the dynamic properties and changes in these properties. This was something that was great to see because it proved that point that these soils being managed with organic binding agents and less disturbance really held together better overall. And in terms of the change in structure, we saw some really interesting differences. So we set this up to show you the change, so the difference between the pre-sample and the post-sample in those large aggregates. If this 0 line had a point by it, that would mean that there was no change or very little change. If there is a positive number, that means that there was an increase in the amount of aggregates. And if there was a negative number, that meant that after rain, there were fewer of those aggregates. And we found that at these sites, while we have averaged the data, it looks different for each rain event, that on average, these soil health sites have better structural stability after rain. There's actually an increase by proportion of macro aggregates relative to these conventional sites, which often have a decrease of the 15 to 20% in terms of their macro aggregates by proportion. So we're seeing this important difference in the aggregate turnover and stability, because to us it was a little surprising to see this increase by proportion, but it goes to show that some of these blues and the microbes in the soil really play an active role in helping the soil recovery post-rain. And this is some data that I'm super excited about because it relates to pore space. So I didn't tell you more about the method at the time, but what we did to collect pore space data was we took out these cylinders, we got pores from the surface soils, and we sent these to a lab out in Oregon, and we were able to get, we use a high prop device, which would help us get soil water retention curves. And from there, we do some nice math, and we're able to calculate the pore size distribution based off of some assumptions with math and physics. And from there, we were able to then create these different pore fractions. So the blue color is going to represent the larger pores, the macropores, the pores that are responsible for really moving and draining water into the soil property zone. The green pores are the mesopores. So these often hold carbon. They're important sites for habitat in the biological organisms of the soil. And the red color pores, while we have these different categories, these are pores that are often so small, it's incredibly difficult for a plant to actually extract that water. So in a healthy soil or an ideal soil, you'd want to see that there's a good number of these blue, large macropores, a lot of these mesopores, medium-sized pores, but it's not just those two size fractions. It's about having a diversity of pore sizes because these pores serve different functions. So having a mix of sizes is better than having just one or the other. And so we saw that the soil health sites often had more of these macropores and mesopores, responsible for moving water and holding enough plant available water. They also had more diversity of these pore sizes. But I felt that that was not actually showing the full picture here. So I pulled up this table here to show you just how different these sites were in terms of their mean pore diameter. So the soil health sites in both systems had much larger mean pore diameters than the conventional pair. And the plant available water was something that was also interesting to us. So we did some work on that. And what's interesting is despite this difference in mean pore diameter, this difference in the macropores and mesopore sizes in or fractions within the soils, we found that the soil health site in Blooming Prairie did have more plant available water, but this wasn't necessarily the case in Kansas City. And one thing to note too with Kansas City is that the soil health site actually has a large amount of variability. It's the standard deviation there. And you can see that that might complicate some of the results there. So pore size distribution is really amazing data to have, but it can be variable as many of these metrics are. And some work that wasn't published, but is really cool to share and we're hoping to do more work on is characterizing soil space from the inside out. So just like you and I can go to the doctor when we get scanned with an x-ray and see the internal components, we can do the same with soil. And here we can see there's different pores, they have different amounts of conductivity, there's different rocks, minerals, particles, and they're arranged in different ways. So I'm just sharing one little image, but we would be very excited to try to do this work and scan other aggregates and soil pores. And briefly, this is a very messy plot, but the point is not to show you each and every little detail here. The point is to show the overall trends and differences between these sites. So here we look at these different carbon and organic metals. And many of us who do soil health work really love to fractionate or split apart different fluids, carbon and organic. And we looked at total carbon. We looked at this biological pool of carbon, which was the mineralizable carbon. So we did those incubation studies. We looked at a physical pool of organic matter and carbon, the particulate organic matter and the mineral associated organic matter, and looked at the carbon within those pools. And we also looked at this chemical pool. So the potassium permanganate oxidized with carbon, or POC as it's known. And what we found was there was the greatest magnitude of difference, where there was actually a significant difference in the Blooming Prairie site. Not so much for these other comparisons. And I think that goes back to not only the amount of time these systems were using these practices and that great time length difference, but also as it relates to how these practices were being staffed. Not only was the Blooming Prairie soil health farmer using cover crops, reducing tillage to the greatest extent that he could, but he was also adding a third crop into the rotation and really trying to prioritize diversity. Another part of the study that we didn't publish, but was quite interesting to us because we had talked about that social side of this conversation and idea for the study, which farmers talking about their ability to get to the field on time and how that might compare to their neighbors. But what we found from these two different surveys that we did, talking with farmers not only individually, but also doing a mail-in survey, we found that non-soil health management system farmers often reported about half of the time that they could get their field work done earlier than their neighbors, which seemingly contradicts what these soil health farmers were sharing with us. But through individual interviews, we sort of pieced together this picture that made more sense to us, which is that oftentimes soil health management system farmers are being much more conservative when it comes to trying to reduce the risk to their fields and trying to reduce compaction. And in cases where they don't have a lot of acres, there's opportunity for farmers to be a little more patient. But for many farmers who have got a large number of acres and they're spread out across different counties, you just have to get the work done. And it's not always pretty, but it's just the nature of what's going on. Trying to help these farmers find ways to protect their fields is going to be a real critical part of our goals. So we're getting close to the end here, and I wanted to provide a few takeaways, which was that rain hits soil and can be incredibly destructive. And these systems do respond differently, as we found. The soil health systems often retain structure after rainfall, and they had an improved pore size distribution, which has meaning for the outcomes of these pores and arrangement of them. And by having multiple stacked practices, you can really drive stronger soil responses than if you just have single practice adoption or a short length of time since you've adopted the practices. So really trying to drive home that we need to have more of these practices being stacked and trying to get farmers to work on these things earlier. And now it's probably urgently now so that they can see these benefits, hopefully soon, but more likely within a few years. And farmers can't control rainfall. It's a risk to them. But what they do have control over is soil function, the soil management of their fields, their crops. That's really going to change the infrastructure of their soil in the channels, the pores, the structure that is responsible for serving as a critical habitat for their crops and also for the organisms in their soil and moving water. So functional soil really is the best infrastructure. So much of this work was published in this paper, which Christina first referenced at the beginning of this talk. And we have QR codes to look at both the paper itself, but then also a handout that we made that's just a 2-page front and back, which kind of distills the work into a nice little summary. So I can pull these up at the end if that's of interest, but we'll keep moving on for now. I also mentioned we have plot trials, but I didn't talk too much about those because we didn't actually see the great difference we thought we would, despite this really nice factorial, rigorous, well-managed system. So if you want to learn more about the results, there are some interesting tidbits, but you can scan the QR code and that'll bring you to this 4-page handout, which has some of the data there. And it is also in that that I have looked at. And I wanted to just say thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate everyone listening in, and I'm happy to take any questions or we can move into breakout rooms, but feel free to send me an email. And last thing I'll say is that the photo that I have on the right here, that's actually something I found myself in a little tricky situation this summer where I got a call from a farmer about a day or two before a field event that we were hosting. And he was out in western Minnesota. And he called me and he said, "Hey, we got 8 inches of rain in 3 days. Where should I dig a soil pit?" So I told him, try to go to the highest spot on the hill that you can. Really try to get away from that water table. But even though he did the best that he could, it was a pretty mucky mess. And my shovel doesn't even do it justice. It was much deeper than it shows. So Thanks again, and if you have questions, reach out.
Thank you, Bailey. If you have any questions, please feel free to either open up your mics or you can put it in the chat box. Um, so we'll wait for some questions for a couple minutes before we go to our breakout rooms. And I will also, if I can, put up a survey. You all know that we have to survey, so I'm going to go to put that up. If you want to work on that while Bailey answers some questions, great. Any questions? You wowed everybody, Bailey.
No, that's fine. I myself tend to ask questions later on.
Okay. Victoria has a question. Did you look at the nitrogen and phosphorus content of the soil samples before and after rain events to see if there was a difference in nutrient retention?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did not for this particular study, but maybe for future work, that would be something that would be of interest. So maybe follow up if there's any opportunities to work together on that. I know I'd like to do a follow-up on this. Yeah, just mainly looking at this. Soil health and schools.
Any other questions for Bailey? If there's no more questions, why don't we go ahead and put up the meeting rooms. For some reason, mine looks funny here. Anne, can you help me out and put up the meeting rooms? Because it's not
Yeah,
popping up
hold
on my,
on.
oh,
All right, those rooms should be open. They should be able to find them at the bottom of your screen under breakout rooms. And you should join the one that makes sense for you. We have educator, agency staff, student, farmer and rancher, or researcher. Don't feel like you have to be too prescriptive about those titles. You may not neatly fit in any of them, or you may fit in multiple. Join the one that makes sense for you today, or whatever fits your fancy.
and we can help move you into a room if you're having problems doing that.
Bailey, it looks like Gabby is in the educator room, but we also have folks in agency or farmer. Um, if you'd like to join one of those so that you guys are kind of distributed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. There's for me. Let me see which
Any
one.
other farmers on the call? I don't want Ron to sit in the farmer room by himself. Oh, looks like he went to agency. So we have two good discussions going, one in the educator room and one under agency.
Yeah, maybe I'll you just see what you guys in here. Pretty easy.
And I turned the captions on. Now I'm trying to figure out how to turn them off. So I was having a hard time hearing. Right. So I have been messing around with the hub. Have you seen that on Zoom? It's a new thing we have in Zoom, and it goes back to 2023. So I can take everything that we've done for some of these surveys and is putting them all together. So I'm gonna see if we can actually to use the surveys we've got and see what we can do with it. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that I can give Nema access to it. I don't know. Wouldn't that be nice? Then she could take all of that information directly, not wait for me to push stuff to her, and she can manipulate it herself. Anyway, I'm going to jump into wherever Bailey's not. Let's see. I'm going to the educator room.
What's interesting and how I got into utilizing cover crops was there's a lot of seed corn production in our area, and there was always a lot of residual and after seed corn production. And the nitrates in the groundwater were not anything we couldn't affect it. So I thought, why not manage the residual rather than try and tell the seed corn companies what they should be putting on? Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I guess I have one comment with what she was talking about. How soon producers can get into the field after a rain event. Here, I think here in Nebraska, it's the exact opposite. If we have tilled ground, usually the cover crop guys are able to get into the fields earlier than the tilled ground.
Mhm.
Yeah, just because the plant matter is taking up a bit of that pressure, you think? Or
Yes,
keeping it a
and
little less wet.
filtration rates are higher.
Yeah.
I believe in it, and it lets the moisture, lets the water get into the soil and leaves the surface a little, maybe not drier, but at least more
Mhm.
better.
Better
Yeah.
aggregate stability, I think, is what the key part of that is too.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree.
Mhm.
I agree.
Christine, is there anything special we're supposed to be chatting about?
Nope,
We were wondering. Okay.
nothing really. Just what you heard about today. If there's anything you want, any speakers or anything in the future, that's all.
Was that so Dean, that one slide she had, it was saying that it was less the timing was later for planting.
No, I think if I remember right, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that slide said that the people that tilled got their work done quicker than where they had cover crops.
Hmm.
And maybe I misunderstood that slide. I don't know, but that's kind of the way
Well,
I
I'm
did it.
kind of now regret because I was puzzled when I saw that too a little bit, and then you mentioned it because I thought, well, on one hand, I mean, let me just go back, like you go back to the 90s when no-till and conventional research was being done side by side. There was a guy at Purdue named Don Griffith. He's passed on long ago, but he would always like in the name of reducing variability. Well, we got to plant the conventional and the no-till on the same day. Can't have that
Hmm.
variability. Well, so I would always ask him like, did you plant it when it was right for no-till, or did you plant it when it was right for
Right.
conventional? Because you don't do both at the same day. You just would not. Nobody would ever do that. And I think that later we had a guy named Tony Vine. He's retired now too, but I guess that means I've been around a long time. But anyway, the situation there is just that they finally started not doing it based on soil conditions, not the calendar.
Mhm.
And so I mean, let's go back to that slide. On one hand, I mean, I could see where conventional might be planted earlier in the spring because it is, we've fluffed the soil, we've dried it out, we've made all these trips over it. But it doesn't mean that the no-till or that's planted in the cover crops where we wait a little bit to get the temperature more correct doesn't mean that we're going to have a more unfavorable. In fact, it usually means better because when you get that 2-inch rain in about 30 minutes in the summer thunderstorm, it soaks in and it doesn't soak in that spring tilled field. So that, I mean, I don't think that you look at that slide a lot of different ways. I don't know that just getting it done earlier is necessarily always a good thing. And we also had a guy that we just went out and visited him last week, and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "My family's kind of like on me." He goes, "Tight margins and everything. We really need to cut something out." And he's like, "Well, they're trying to get me to cut my cover crops out," but he shared that a few years ago he had some areas where his cover crop didn't come up very well because probably just 2 years ago because it was a really dry fall, and some other areas where it did come up better. And the areas where the next year where he no-tilled beans into that, the soil was crusted where there was the
Mhm.
cover crop. He still didn't do tillage, but the beans were crusted where there was not a decent cover crop stand, and
Yeah.
the beans did not crust where the cover crop was. And he's like, "Wow, that was really eye-opening for him." So
I mean, I think I thoroughly believe that in a no-till, even into cover crops, the temperature that the corn's planted at is more consistent than in a tilled situation,
yeah,
because I've seen many times that the fluctuation of emergence in tilled ground and in the no-till cover, it's more consistent. Yes, it
Mhm.
may take a little longer to come up, but I believe the emergence is more even.
And what we're seeing in Michigan right now is that soil, the soil determines everything. Like Mark said, we've had to throw the calendar out. I mean, where I'm at, we just are at the end of a pretty severe ice and snowstorm, and we're getting rain again this weekend. We're going from teens, like we're at 12 and 14 high to 20 to 50 high by Saturday. So we're gonna have melting and rain. And maybe by April 1, maybe we'll be able to get in the fields, and those fields that had the no-till and cover, we're gonna get in sooner because of temperature, but also the mud. We're not even our sands. I'm sand, pure
You
sand,
can
and
send
it's
that moisture
muddy.
down here because right now we're
Oh, you can
fighting
have it.
we're fighting fires, thousands of acres of
Yeah.
fires. We would we would gladly take a rain or snow or anything to help
Ha-
with that. And besides that, we really have not had that much moisture all ever
mm.
since fall. So
We'll ship it to you, especially the ice storm. You can have inches of ice.
I think we'll take any kind of moisture at this point. So, but anyway.
Does anyone have any topics that they would like us to address in some cafes or speakers you like? You've heard, you want to hear them again?
Has anybody done any monitoring of cover with cover without cover on soil moisture levels throughout the growing season?
I don't know if anyone has published it, but that we can look in that. I mean, I have done it for our own knowledge.
And I have too, and I'm going to do that again this coming growing season. Matter of fact, I got an appointment with a producer that does splits up a field cover versus no cover in strip situations.
Mhm.
I'm going to put some capacitance probes in there this year to kind of keep track of that. So
Yeah, it's a good topic.
I'm trying to think of if Minnesota Discovery Farms, they have a pretty strong focus on
Mhm.
water. Um, but I don't know if they've looked at cover crops at all. So I'm just trying to scroll through their website here and see.
Because usually anybody that has not tried any covers, that's the first complaint that they have. Well,
Mhm.
that darn cover crop uses way too much moisture
Moisture.
and so on and so forth, and so they don't want to do it. Well, that's
Mhm.
kind of why I started monitoring it to show them. I mean, what I've done so far, yes, it uses moisture. Well, it's going to. Any growing plant's going to use moisture. But in the end, at the end of the year, it's pretty even. I mean, even especially here with irrigation, it's no issue really.
Does look like UNL has somebody. I'll have to look at this. Who did this one?
Well, they probably do, but
Well,
like I said,
when you said cover versus no cover, we do a lot of cover and moisture
yeah,
and no cover and
yeah.
moisture, but to pit them head to head,
Not side by side.
yeah, yeah.
Right. And that's the approach that I do under a pivot, we will purposely leave a spot where like drilling rye, we don't drill
Hmm.
rye, and then I can go back in underneath that pivot and put a probe where they did that and where they did
Yeah.
plant the rye. So
We'll look into I will make some phone calls because I'm sure that maybe somebody at the MCC would know, or even Rob Myers might know somebody.
I'm just curious if anybody else is doing what I've been looking at.
And it would be interesting because I mean, you're in Nebraska, I'm in northern Michigan, totally different
Of
soil
course,
types, but I think the effects and the impacts would be the same. I think we'd find the same information, even though they're
I would,
different.
I would, I would think so.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm up in the fruit vegetable world.
And I mean, we may have that period of where that cover uses more moisture
Hmm.
simply because we don't get the rainfall like you do farther east of here. I'm just theorizing here, but
I'm always game to hear more about the underground grazers because
Yeah.
I think it's we're just scratching the surface of knowledge there.
Hmm.
the underground, what, repeat that, would you, Mark?
I said the underground grazers, the underground livestock.
I thought you said razors and I thought, am I missing something here? Grazers. Okay, I got
Yeah.
it.
Yep. I'd agree with you there, Mark.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I
Totally
know
agree.
we got a guy at Purdue we talked about if we did the fall um, soil health Nexium deal, but the at Purdue that's not been there real long, but just anybody that's in that realm, I just love to hear more about that type because,
Hmm.
and then, especially like what the beneficials and drawing them in with the specific cover crops and things like that, which a lot to grasp there, a lot of unknowns.
Hmm.
Yes, and I sometimes I think the depth of the roots may be underestimated. A few years back, I went into a cover crop rye field with a getting soil probe to find out what the depth of the roots were. the rye was only above ground was only 3 inches tall. And I found roots to 3 foot.
Ooh.
So
Mhm.
that the below ground is very, very important. And I know at the time NRCS always critiqued a field that was planted that they were cost sharing on just by the above ground biomass. And I don't know if I woke them up, but at least I
Mhm.
shared that information there.
Yep. Yep. I also think it is interesting, or would be interesting to compare it to whatever the native landscape was like there. So in a lot
Oh yeah.
of our states, compare it to the prairie or, whatever was there. Because to me, that would be sort of the baseline or the goal, right? And like, how far away are we from that?
Yeah. I mean, in the highly tilled or farming areas, about the only thing you may have to go by is fence lines. That's down here.
Hmm.
Yeah. That has maybe
Right.
grass or grass in it, whatever.
Yeah,
So
none of it's left. Yeah.
that's right. None of it's left. Is right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing tomorrow I'm doing a private applicator program and I'm doing topic soil health, cover crops for soil health or whatever and rejuvenate soil, something like that. I can't remember what the title is exactly, but it's on that topic. But anyway, kind of two things was one was just the sheer change of of the soil, the system is a systemic type of thing. But this the biology that's there. The one thing that floored me is I went out on January 31st. There had been snow on the ground most of the month of January here. It was cold, and I went out on January 31st. It was a Saturday morning. I just wanted to say I could do it on a Saturday morning because I was pretty sure I could. Took a soil probe out. I could poke it in everywhere, and I had to work a couple spots, but I could poke it in the ground everywhere and pull out a core where the cover crop was. And
Hmm.
there was about a foot of snow on the ground, so we had extra insulation, but still, I'm going to tell you where the cover crop was not. I could not do that.
Yeah, I believe that.
Snow alone didn't do it. But I think the biology. I mean, the biology going on creates. Maybe heat's the wrong word, but there's some energy there, and
Yeah.
it
Yep. No, I
keeps
think you're
stuff
right.
warmer. I mean, and when you think about life in the soil, that's got to be beneficial. Can I prove that? No, but it's got to be. I mean,
Yeah, we have some soil thermometers that are so probably more like probes. And I've had
Okay.
some fun putting them next to cover crops in the winter and monitoring the temperature, especially in the spring. We're seeing a heat up right next to the cover much faster than in areas where there is no cover. And that to me is those microorganisms working. They're starting earlier, they're getting that jump. And again, we're going through snow. I mean, we got a lot of snow here still. So we're going through snow to do that.
That's the only thing it could be, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, so I am right on we get a lake effect. So we do get most years we get snow before the ground freezes. And we get quite a bit. I mean, we have feet of snow before the ground freezes. And then in January we have a melt and then it freezes and then we get more snow.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta head
but
out, folks, but it was great talking with you,
Yep.
and I'm
Yep.
sure I'll see you guys down the road. So, yeah.
Bye, Gabby.
just real quick too, one other thing is uh, I had because we got some interference with our drone seating because we got started late. We had to fiddle for 2 hours because we were too close to an airport,
Hmm.
even though it wasn't the FAA shutting down, it was the drone company. So I had to get around that. But anyway, um, so we didn't get all the cover crop strip seeded the first day. So we had to come back as like 10 days later. And the other thing I did observe, which, again, was uh, real or not, I don't know for sure, but I felt like had an easier time pushing the probe in where the cover crop was seeded earlier than I could later.
Mhm.
And I just had to be, more biomass root material there to keep that going is what I feel like was going on. But I didn't have to work as hard and these strips were done in wheat after, so like the first planting seeding of it was pretty early. It was last week of August. The other one we did early September, early to mid-September. So
So
anyway, so
are you going into corn then?
no, I wish we were, but this guy does
Have
not have a
you?
corn head, so he does wheat
Okay.
and then he does beans and he does hay.
Because I've got a producer that got a hold of me. He has his own drone and he's been uh seeding into corn. Okay. Mainly for his goal is for grazing in the off season. And we're gonna try different mixes. He gave me what he has been doing. So I'm trying to figure out if we can do something different that maybe he can get more biomass early on, for fall grazing or spring grazing, whatever. I was just when you said drone seeding, I thought, oh, well, that might be a source that I could talk to, but you're going into altogether different situation than what I'd be going into.
There's been a lot of people stop by there and say, "Hey, what you got growing out?" To the guy that because he's part his field, but he's also been tied. It was actually formerly his business, but it's a pesticide applicator business,
Okay.
and
Okay.
so that his son, his daughter, and son-in-law own now. But anyway, the situation there is that he's had a lot of people stop by and say, "What do you got growing out there?" He goes, because they go, we've got our pastures don't look that good, and it looks like there's some good eat because the oats were out there. I mean, this all
Right.
this stuff, and there's a lot to eat, triticale, and I mean, there's a lot of good eating out there. And we did send the daikon radish off to the lab, and let daikon radish leaves over 20% crude protein. So that was interesting too.
Right. And I think probably even after it winter kills or whatever, the value even of the dry matter is probably just as good as the green.
Yeah, they don't eat those daikon radishes too much once they're dead. They stink and they're mush. But the oats and the triticale doesn't really die, but the oats will die. But it's still, I think it's still not. We had such a late warm fall, and then it did turn cold quickly. A few of the oats started to go in a reproductive stage that we seeded, especially the ones in the August. But by and large, most of the oats was not in the reproductive stage yet, and so they were pretty healthy, nutritious wise, and I think they were pretty good. We didn't actually do a sample after they were. It would almost be interesting to go out there now and clip and see what the value of that is. If you turn something out, we might have to do that. Actually, that's a good idea, Dean. But yeah, I think that's there's definitely was a lot of value there.
Okay.
Well, thanks, everybody.
You bet. Thank you. This has been good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. See you next
Yep.
month.